So, not entirely clear. And again, I'm not entirely sure this is a surprise, but the number one publication that everyone reads to get their technology information is the FT. For the C-suite, it's the Sunday Times. I don't think that would come as a major surprise. So nearly half the people that we spoke to, the FT is number one important magazine for them. Interestingly, Wall Street Journal of Europe, something of a mecca, something we all want to be in, it's only read half as much. And I suppose of even more surprise is the comparatively little influence that magazines like Management Today, Director, Business Week, and International Herald Tribune have on these various types of job. Now, interestingly, the FT is much more broadly read than just the UK. Again, we all know that. But in the US, 23% of people that we surveyed regularly read the FT. 0% in Canada. I don't know what that says about Canada. But it's 21% in China too. So, piece in the FT, we know the C-suite's going to read it, we know the non-C-suite's going to read it, and we know people outside of our particular location are going to read it too. But when it comes to credibility, the FT stands head and shoulders above the rest. What is clear from this is that if you take the four titles to the left, FT, Times, Economist and Daily Telegraph, that's the way to reach the C-suite. Two to the right, the way to reach the IT managers. And I suppose if you think about it, that is reasonably logical. The IT manager is going to be slightly younger. As a consequence, they may be slightly more liberal in their attitudes, hence the Guardian, hence the Independent. Now that may be a gross generalisation, but that's probably the way I've rationalised it to myself. I suppose it may be self-evident. If you compare it to the Wall Street Journal in the US, and against this number of the FT, Wall Street comes out with 85% credibility. So it carries huge weight in the US. Again, for those of us who've worked in technology a long time, not a major surprise. But the FT carries 51% credibility. It's not massively below what it is in the UK. So if you're going to target the US and the UK, or even Western Europe and the UK, the US, then FT is the way to go. You would normally put it alongside Computer Business Review as insightful, in-depth analysis of the industry. It's not bad. And I thought that was quite remarkable. However, when you look to see credibility, Information Age jumps out. So not many people read it, but those that do really buy into it and what they have to say. So if you're looking for a way to convince people about products or services, about what you are as a business, then Information Age, whilst having a relatively small regular readership amongst those we surveyed, jumps out as being incredibly believable, particularly amongst the IT managers. Computer Weekly, as I guess is no surprise, comes out highest in credibility, and most of those publications are read more by the IT managers than by the C-suite. Again, not a huge surprise there. Now, we also asked people about where they get their online information. And the one thing that stood out for me, given the rise of things like ZDNet and Silicon and so on, is that people read them far less regularly than perhaps we think. Ink counts more than bits and bytes. And for me, that's a learning. If you want to get to the people that make the decisions, we need to think more about going back to print, which is a bit frightening. There's an awful lot of electronic outlets for us. It's very hard to get in weekly computing, and harder still. And computing, as we know, doesn't take many vendor stories. I'll draw it to an end. We can get back to a glass of wine. I think, as we all intuitively know, analysts are critical. They are becoming more so. When we repeat this exercise next year, my bet is that we'll find that analysts are even more important than they have been. I don't think we underestimate how they can be applied across all elements of the decision-making process. And one thing that is key for me is that Gartner is important, but Forrester is becoming just as important. Blogging. My cynical hat has been removed. I think it's time to start figuring out how we deal with it. You know, the days of having our CEO blog just because he wants to be seen in the great outside world, well, they may be over. but we have to figure a way to use the channel effectively. And media. The one thing I would say, we have to pick our channels carefully. It's no good just being on CNBC because we can, or because that's where the CEO wants to be. We need to be there for a reason, because it does affect the business.